Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So grateful you've joined us today. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org. There's a lot of great interviews there. There's some great power clips there and other content that you might enjoy. We can also be found on all the social media platforms. Love to have you follow us. You can see a lot of great content and clips of some of these amazing guests. We've been really blessed by our list of people that we've had on the program, so I think you'll really enjoy it. So goodlifetelevision.org and then Good Life TV or Good Life Television on the social media platforms. But this is a really special program we have today. I'm welcoming for the first time my dad, which is fun and good. My dad's here for every taping. I'll have to tell you, he's the number one fan, I think, of this program. So he's been here for every taping, but this is the first time he's sitting on this side of the camera. So I'm excited to have my dad with me, Reverend Jonathan Wilson, and my dad has been a pastor for many, many years. He retired a few years ago, but he was a pastor for decades, has a pastor's heart, and in addition to his pastoring, he was for 32 years the executive director of the Turner Foundation. The Turner Foundation is the nonprofit organization that now sponsors Good Life TV. So this program is sponsored by the Turner Foundation. We're going to talk more about the Turner Foundation in a second. But my dad ran the Turner Foundation for 32 years, so he gave decades of his life to this organization, and we have a lot of gratitude for that. And so we're going to talk with him a little bit about the Turner Foundation and his father-in-law, who is Reverend Dr. Albert J. Turner, who was quite a guy. We'll be talking about him in a minute. On the other couch, on the other side, is Douglas and Spencer Doman. Douglas and Spencer are president and CEO of Doman International, which is a nonprofit organization that helps families with a special needs child learn how to help that child develop, help that child move towards wellness, grow, and so forth. They also have a program for well children, which is at domanlearning.com. Douglas's father was also a pioneer. His name was Glenn Doman. We're going to talk about him too on this program, but Glenn founded this work that's now referred to as the Doman Method. And so Glenn was the architect, the pioneer of that vision. And now with Douglas and Spencer, that work's being carried on, and it has impacted tens of thousands of children and families all around the world. And folks actually come from all around the world with their special needs child to Philadelphia to see the Domans to get help with their child. So we have here 3 generations total on each side of the microphone here, and we have 2 nonprofit organizations. We have 2 works, I guess you could say, that go back. Literally were founded just about the same exact time in the mid 1950s on the West Coast. Albert J. Turner was founding the Turner Foundation, which has the principal mission of that was serving low-income people through the vehicle of housing, of affordable housing. So Reverend Turner was launching that on the West Coast, while Glenn Doman in Philadelphia was launching his work, which would end up touching the lives of, again, tens of thousands of special needs, brain injured people and their families. So that's the introduction. That's what we're all doing here. But I thought, Douglas, it might be good to start with you and just talking about your father, talking about Glenn Doman. And I know some of the stories, but I mean, from his time in the military and his service, and really noble service. where some of the principles that he carried with him into his work with brain injured people were developed on the battlefield, literally. But tell us just about your father and kind of who he was.
Well, as you know, part of the philosophical foundation of the Doman method is the family. It's all about family. And where the family is strong, our program is strong. And so we are students of families, and we have known some of the greatest families in the world from all different walks of life. They can be great, whether they're very wealthy or whether they're poor. They can be great families, and of course, saving the life of their special needs child. So the family has really been under attack for so many decades, and it's the foundation of culture and society, and we will be fighting for the family, right up until the end. It's the answer to the world's problems are in family. As you know, my father had a lecture, is the family is the answer. And so it's wonderful to be here with 3 generations of Turners, the pioneers here too,
right,
and 3 generations of Domans. And my father said that there's no more royalty left in the world. He said there is only the royalty of service to others. And of course, serving others and giving to others, brings joy and empowerment and reason, for us to live. And I think that's true for your 3 generations and for our 3 generations as well.
Yes.
So, we have one of our centers is in Tuscany in Italy. And I had the opportunity on a weekend to go to one of the Antinori vineyards. And the Antinori family, the number is not right, but it's an astronomical number. It's something like 36 generations of making wine.
Oh my goodness.
Now I can see how a family could do that.
Yeah, right. Right.
Although making wine is not easy, and making really good wine is really, really not easy. But I guess the challenge for the Turner Foundation and for Doman International is, okay, we have 36 more generations to go.
Right. We got a ways to go.
So we're just getting started here.
Right. I love it. That's true. And you make a good point about, these 2 pioneers, Glenn Doman and Albert J. Turner, were pioneers, were entrepreneurs in a sense for others. This wasn't about themselves. This wasn't about them getting rich. This wasn't about their own kind of ego, as it were. I mean, it really was an others-centered, both organizations. It was started by an others-centered person. But the interesting story with my dad is, I'll let him tell the story, but on how he met the Turners is very interesting as a young teenager. So Dad, tell us that story and kind of your first taste of Dr. Turner.
Well, I remember going to my mom one day and said, I'd like to get a car. And she says, well, get a job. And so I went out, and the first job that I applied for was at the Rose Garden Village in Riverside. And Mrs. Turner hired me. I went in for the interview, and she said, when can you start? Tonight? And so I started and got my first job there and worked there. I did everything. I did the dishes and cleaned the toilets and even became a short order cook when the cook was fired. And then Patty was a waitress there. So we ran into each other occasionally and ran into each other at school. I had my locker over her, so I was always teasing her, and so we got to.
Lucky. I mean, the good Lord had something to do with that.
Right.
And we dated each other throughout high school for a couple of years, but we were dating other people also. But Then she went away to Westmont College, and I went to Cal State Fullerton, and we dated other people, but we always kept in touch. And her dad, Reverend Turner, told her a long time ago, he's the one you're going to marry.
Really?
Yeah, he predicted that when she says, I don't really know him. Anyway, he was right. We ended up getting married when we graduated from college. And at that time, I worked at the village and did all the things. Anything that needed to be done, I did it. But I loved the people and the interaction with the people and the elderly folks there. And so I loved serving. And Albert Schweitzer once said something to the effect of, I don't know what others will find, but I have found that the only thing that really makes me happy is serving others. And it's a paraphrase, and I found that to be true. And I went into the ministry, and I did the foundation on the side. One day a week, I drove from wherever I was down to the village, met with the staff, examined the grounds, met with the old folks, and just had a ball doing it.
Yeah.
And
And
you really
I loved
had
it.
it easy. I mean, you had your father-in-law right there pitching for you from the beginning.
Yeah.
My wife wouldn't even take me to meet her father after years. I wasn't good enough.
I hadn't heard that part of the story, actually.
Yeah, he predicted it. He was a prophet.
Yeah. Spencer, talk about memories of your grandfather, and kind of course, you didn't just grow up with him, but you actually worked with him. I mean, a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, to talk about Glenn Doman, your grandfather.
Yeah, so he was a teacher. You know, he was a teacher of parents, and he was completely mission driven. Helping kids was what he was all about. I remember, you were talking earlier before about his service in the military, and once I asked my grandmother if she ever remembered him having nightmares, for example, flashbacks from his experience in the war, and she said that she never remembered a time where he woke up from a nightmare, with memory from battle, but he used to wake up in the middle of the night, and every time she would ask him, what were you dreaming about, he would say, I was dreaming about one of the kids that were trying to help. So even when he was dreaming, he would fixate on how to help kids. And he was a beautiful speaker. I got to watch, I think, one of the greatest public speakers of our generation, and he really touched parents and taught them about why they're important, which I think was really, really important. I think especially in the 1950s and 60s, for a professional to be telling moms especially how important they are. This was a time when, mothers were not respected for what they were. And still today in a lot of the professional world, moms still aren't respected. But he saw them for who they were. And, just as we were talking, I thought of something he taught me. So he used to say that a genius is someone who sees the world for what it is and sees the way the world ought to be, and then moves the world toward the way the world ought to be. And I don't know if he realized he was describing himself, but as we're talking, problems like housing, right? Problems like special needs, everyone can see these problems, right? Everyone knows housing is a problem. Everyone knows kids with special needs have issues, but it takes a really special person to say, this is the vision, and we're going to get to that vision.
Yes.
And I think that's something that the two foundations have in common.
Yes, well said. That's a very great point. And not just dreamers. I mean, certainly they were both dreamers,
Yes.
but they were doers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and
it's a rare combination.
And that's a rare combination, because there are a lot of people with pie in the sky ideas and nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
But these two were dreamers and doers.
And by the way, I think the doerness comes from my grandmother, who, as I said, was a a fundamentalist Presbyterian, and so
That's right.
It was for her. It was all about work, work.
Right. Right.
And of course service too.
Yes. There is something really powerful about service and about the Scripture says, there's no greater love than laying down your life for another person, for your friend. And I think, in the case of I think both of these men and then both of these men, there has been a lot of laying down of the life in terms of sacrifice, working many, many years, working hard, staying the course, not for some huge financial reward or, because you got stock options in the company that are going to be, but for the love, and I just think that's amazing. The last sentence of your father's book, I did get to meet him, which I'm very grateful for. I did get to hear him lecture, actually. And there was a great gentleness about him, in my experience, and yet he's not as shrinking violet. I mean, this is a strong man, much like, my grandfather was a strong man and my father's a strong man. The gentleness, though, and it was interesting to me that in that last sentence he kind of throws in there, if we're able to do this, and I'll let you summarize it better than I can, but that we could have a gentle revolution, is the way he put it. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Right. Well, it's the last lines of the book, How to Teach Your Baby to Read, which was his 1963 book, and now more than 5 million copies sold in 20 languages. It's in its third edition, very much out there, teaching parents, to this day. But in the very last line of the book, he says, even if this book succeeds in teaching only one child to read, it will be the beginning of a gentle revolution, meaning children will be able to achieve their potential. Of course, it led to tens of thousands of children learning to read in so many different languages. But yes, that gentle revolution is, I think what both foundations are all about, for people to be able to have affordable housing and live in a noble and respectable way. And for us, for children who have so much wasted potential, the way the world works now, for them to be able to fully express that potential, what could be more beautiful?
Yeah, wonderful. Dad, both you and Grandpa were pastors, and so you've also been a nonprofit executive, and but fundamentally at heart you're a pastor, and he was a pastor, and yet you had a much different upbringing. I mean, in terms of it wasn't always easy. I mean, you had a little bit of a tough upbringing, and then but then you found your way to become a pastor, and I wonder a little bit about that and what he had to do with that, if anything, into your decision. You weren't in a churched family or a religious family, but yet here you spent decades as a pastor. But talk a little bit about that. Did Grandpa have anything to do with that, or did he encourage you? Or
yeah, he did encourage me, but I was an early reader. We were talking about this. You were talking about this earlier, but I learned to read in a one-room schoolhouse in Missouri, and you couldn't pronounce anything. You had to sight read. So I began reading every chance I got, and I would read every night before I went to bed. I would read an inspirational story out of a book, like Reader Digest, inspirational stories kind of thing. And that's where I saw that Schweitzer quote. The only people who are truly happy have sought and found how to serve. And that became a cornerstone. And then about age 16, 17, I accepted Christ into my life, and my life changed. Now I wanted to not only just serve people, but I wanted to love them to Christ. And then at the village, what we found is now we served and loved the elderly, but at the village we served the children, using so much of the principles that Dean had learned, from you guys. So we put into action those principles. The children, for example, normally they take the summer off. Well, our staff goes full bore in the summer, and they're accelerating their grade level. While the pandemic is going on and nobody's going to school, our kids are going and learning and getting ahead. And it's all based on the Doman principles. But we love people, we love children. We found that the way to love people the best is to love their children.
Right. Right. That's very true. And at the housing experience we've had, it's an amazing dynamic that he mentions there. We buy troubled properties, or difficult properties that can be in difficult neighborhoods. And then in the typical C-grade apartment complex where you'd have low-income housing going on, in a lot of places in the country they're referred to as the projects because they're a government project. But what I've discovered over time, he's right, is that you take care of the child, you win the parent. You bless and serve the child, you're not going to get any problems from that parent. You tutor that child, the parent's not going to want to get evicted because the apartment complex across the street's not teaching them violin or the drums or the tutoring after school. So it's a very good point. That principle of family, of caring for the child, and then ended up having this benefit of the parent themselves. That's a great point.
In my life, there have been times, I think in all of our lives, where there are just special moments that we knew at that time it was a special moment, but maybe we didn't understand, why. Like when I first met my wife, I was already thinking this could be the one.
Yeah, right.
So 40 years later,
right.
and 4 kids, I was right. But in terms of our relationship with the Turner Foundation, and you weren't totally aware of this, but when the Turner Foundation made that beautiful video about the 3 kids in Santa Barbara, and I came here in 2006,
right.
And that 2006 lecture was the beginning of a lecture tour that would take me around the world to more than 30 nations and 5 continents, lecturing to more than 30,000 parents of special needs children and well babies. And for all the special needs children's lectures, I always showed the Turner Foundation video. Wow. And we had it translated into Italian, Spanish, Russian, 100 times, even in the languages that I would be listening to on a big screen. I would get teary-eyed every single time. And I would always talk about Ella Claire because, of course, she appears in that video.
Yeah.
And then, fortunately, we were able to get updates from you over the years.
Right.
And so I would say to my wife, Rosalind, who is our clinical director, have we heard anything from the Wilsons? What's going on with Ella? Maybe it's time to call them, finding out. And so, for us to be reunited now,
yeah.
after 15 years in a greater service, that moment of being here in Santa Barbara 15 years ago
yeah.
was the beginning of us being here today. And
yeah.
It's beautiful, and we're so deeply appreciative to you and the foundation for everything that you're doing, for helping us to help hurt kids. You know how serious the situation is in the world, how terrible it is for the kids and the parents.
Yeah.
They suffer. You talked about, sacrifice. I never sacrificed. I did what I did because I loved it, and I wanted to do. There's nothing else I wanted to do, but our parents and kids, they do suffer in a world, a hostile world, and we've got to, educate that world in terms of the children's abilities and their potential.
Amen, and thank you. And there is an exciting partnership that has been formed between the Turner Foundation and Doman International to benefit and bless and help special needs children. So the Turner Foundation also has an interest in special needs children, and we found the right partner. So this partnership, you'll be hearing a lot more about that on Good Life TV. But last, I just wanted to say real quickly what we talked about earlier, just looking at you, Spencer. We're the third generation people sitting here on the outside.
Shut up those old guys, huh?
Yeah, that's enough. we were talking about it and about, we don't want these foundations, these organizations to become simply museums to our grandfathers, right? I mean, that we're grateful, we honor them. I renamed the foundation after my grandfather. I mean, we honor them. I honor my father, his work, what he's done, and we gave him a big award a year ago. We're grateful. And guys like you and I, we have an opportunity to build.
Absolutely.
Talk about that just with 30 seconds we have left.
Well, sure. And it's interesting that you talk about renaming the organization after your grandfather because our organization is named Doman International in honor of Glenn Doman, not because our name happens to be Doman. But yeah, I think when you get to stand on the shoulders of giants, it helps you see a lot further.
Right.
And so I'm honored to be in this work, and so my goal is to bring this work to as many families of kids with special needs as possible, and to continue to innovate new ways. I agree with you. It's not about building a museum to the past generations. I think our grandfathers, if they knew that we weren't continuing to forge ahead, would be very sad,
Right.
And so I think one of the things I learned from him is, he used to say that the only thing that should stay the same around here is change. You've got to keep changing, you've got to keep learning, you got to keep innovating, and so
right.
that's what we're trying to do.
Well said. And did you grow the beard to look like him?
So that was not the reason, but I get that comment a lot, so it's I'll keep it just for that.
Yeah, just looking at you just right now for a second, I kind of saw him. This has been fun. Thank you guys. Congratulations on this decades of work, and Dad, you as well. And we're looking forward to this partnership. So thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks.
Dad, thanks for coming. Come again.
Yeah.